You know, common land was a part of our heritage in the United Kingdom. What has happened to it? And more importantly, can we reclaim that heritage? In this podcast, I hope to give you some suggestions and introduce you to some very successful schemes relating to the idea of reclaiming the commons. So in this podcast, we will refer to a commons as a resource that can be shared by all. Although remember, the term is also used to mean common ownership of a resource. Until the Enclosure Acts decimated England of common land, these spaces were a part of many people's lives, serving as an area to graze a few cattle, or keep a few pigs, or to dig some land to grow a small amount of food. The land was sometimes part of a nearby hillside, or a local heath, but it could also be land within the village, and some of those areas have survived as village greens. When folk were driven away from the use of this land, they were often forced to go and live in towns and seek work in factories. They were displaced from their homes. England was not the only country to end the use of common land. In Scotland, the Highland areas, including large amounts of common space that were used by crofters as small farmers, were also cleared. The land, often moorland, was taken over by rich landowners and used for sheep farming or even for rough shooting. The lairds found it very easy to obtain eviction orders once the Enclosure Acts had been passed by Parliament. Many of those cleared from the land found new homes in the United States, but even so, they had lost their original homes and their livelihood. Sadly, the practice of driving people from their homesteads continues today. Land clearance in South American countries and African nations is driving away people from their common land. The land that provided a home and a living is vanishing as large clearances continue to take place. Some of the land is then being sold off by governments to farmers wishing to enter the region and set up large ranching activities. Let us also remember that Native Americans were driven from their homelands, and common land no longer had a meaning for them. That land was also sold off by the government for ranchers to make their farms. Here are just a few examples of attempts to reclaim what is regarded as common land. The land here has been used to start an orchard. Think of the benefits here. There is food for those who live in the area. The various trees can provide apples, pears, plums and cherries. There is a leisure area providing paths to walk and shade. There are rare varieties of fruits here that would otherwise be lost. Much nearer to my home there is common land that has been used to provide a community farm. Think of the benefit that comes from this enterprise, which includes helping young people understand where their food comes from, helping them understand how to care for animals, and providing useful work experience for a small number of young people. Then think about what has happened to much common land recently, about the land from playing fields being sold off for housing developments. Opportunities were also provided for adults who have disabilities. Look at the range of activities they are involved in. Do you think this is better than selling the land for housing or industrial development? Can you see how local people are gaining a valuable resource? Do you think these people now feel more involved and a part of their community? This is what I really love about these community projects. Some of them go back and recapture the spirit and intent of the early commons. Land is being used to grow crops to feed families, to show families how to cultivate, and in many cases to introduce new crops and widen our own experiences to new cultures. Common land is not something to be sold off to balance a budget or left as derelict land. Common land can play a vital part in the lives of communities. Using our commons in this way helps those who have to bring up a family on a low income. Here is still another example of a community orchard, this one set up in Stockport. There are some things that really attracted me to this particular project. The aims including the introduction of bees and the idea of celebrating old festivals such as wassailing. I was fortunate to go to a rural school where gardening was a part of the curriculum. How nice to see this project being used as an open-air classroom. You know, If you have faith to put ideas like this together for young people, you will find they develop their social skills in a productive way. Think about that. Remember, community orchards can help us keep our culture through festivals and play an important part in keeping rare varieties of fruits. Festivals help to bring people together to share their joys and accomplishments. So what can we do? We can show an interest in reclaiming our heritage of common land. There is land that can be used for gardening, and we can use our skills to provide food. If you've never gardened before, don't worry. There are always plenty of folks around to give you advice and show you how. Almost any area of a town or city has space that could be used. Look around your town and see what opportunities are there. You may even be fortunate to find that your local council owns land that could be used for a community farm. Land owned by a council really belongs to the community. Never forget that. I'm not suggesting that all green space should be taken over for gardens or orchards or farms. There is still a need for green space that needs to be maintained for leisure, for walking, for children to play, or just to sit and relax in a park. Much work has also been carried out over the last decade to try and restore areas to natural forest, improving the land and providing a valuable resource for the future, as well as a home for wildlife. But in many cases there is potential to do something with space that is effectively the new commons, owned by a council but not managed by the community. Does the council and the local community really benefit when a site is left undeveloped? Even if the land is only left for around 18 months, it could still produce a useful food crop. Should we try and raise our expectations? Does green space really have to mean simply mown grass, lampposts and rubbish bins? Can you think of ways in which we could brighten up this particular scene? What ideas might you have for the areas outside these houses? What would be your first steps in reclaiming this commons? Each time that I see a site like this, I wonder, what will it be like in 12 months' time? So how do you bring about change? One group that has been very successful from a small town called Todmorden and are known as the Incredible Edible. They have planted edible crops in a large number of places around their small town, even in the churchyard. Remember that churchyards and other areas are often neglected. The costs of maintenance seem high. However, put some of the land to a different use and the whole place can look more cheerful. I should add that only space between graves was used in this particular example. The use of a commons by a community starts with everyone getting involved. That means being prepared to give up some time and making the effort to become a part of your community. There are rewards. You will meet new people and your lifestyle is going to be a lot healthier. Even during the winter months there will be work to do. Think of the rewards when spring arrives and the area will start to turn green. There are plants that can be harvested for food over the winter, and there are also bulbs that can be planted to brighten up the early days of spring. Sometimes an area of land is left vacant with plans for further development. This provides an opportunity. Ask how long it will be before the land is developed. If there is a growing season before development, then this should be seen as an opportunity, as it was in this particular case. Everyone can have a herb garden in their street. Container-grown plants do need watering regularly, but the use of large containers means that more and more places can be used for growing. Now, there are examples of communities that have gone much further in reclaiming commons. They've gone further than just reclaiming the land. So in Totnes, the community works together to support the local economy, even having their own form of currency. The Totnes pound can be used only with local traders within the town. Supporting local trade in this way can help people see the value and opportunities in growing and selling food locally. Perhaps your whole community represents a commons that needs to be reclaimed. Take a look at your own activities. Where does your food come from? Could you have bought more of your food locally? Thinking in this way helps us to take the next step. If the food can be grown locally, then why don't we try and grow it ourselves? In some ways, these next two ideas are not a part of reclaiming a commons, but they do show thinking is being changed, and our perception of cities in the future could change. This image shows an architect's dream for a building in Paris. Here is one of the dreams that is about to come true, a building being developed in Singapore. This struck me as having an interesting approach. Could this be the opportunity to create a commons? That would be a whole new concept. The idea of creating commons within our cities where we could provide green space, grow food, and develop areas that would be more attractive to those who live in those cities. Those may be dreams, but we can make a start, as they did in Todmorden, by thinking about how we can change the areas that we live in. I hope that this short podcast will give you some ideas for your own area and encourage you to find out a little more about some of the schemes that have been shown and talked about in this podcast. Thank you for watching and for listening.